is really critical. So I looked up for some interesting facts on you online, but you don't talk about yourself nearly as much as Mike, so it was all hard to get some stories, and I asked Wayne for some facts and he was tight-lipped, so very lucky on that count. But everyone, a big round of applause and welcome our
Kia ora, and thank you very much. Wayne's tight-lipped because it's his birthday today, so he wants to know about it. So it's all the beans know about you and I, Wayne, so it'll be fun. Well, good morning, and it's lovely to be here. Lovely to be able to sponsor this event because there's a whole lot of conversations we have to have, and great to have Mike here to actually start those conversations and share some of the information that's going forward. I look after the electricity distribution network that sort of plays itself around Wellington, Porirua and the Hutt Valley. And the thing about that network is it's up for quite a bit of change. And the change really comes down to how far our consumers want us to change it and how far we actually need to build it. So let's go on this journey and see what's happening with the network. I'll talk a wee bit about Wellington Electricity, talk about some of the experiences we had with solar on the network, what's happening with EV. We'll then sort of wander off in some multi-factor benefits that are happening around the Hutt Valley, and then we'll have a bit of a summing up. So the network itself is really just managing poles and wires to about 175,000 homes, businesses in the Wellington, Hutt Valley, and Porirua region. So it's a great catchment. It's very densely populated. No cherry orchards, sorry. And not a lot of agriculture in the area, so it's a little bit different from what we'd expect across the rest of New Zealand. So we're a distribution business. We're the fourth largest network in New Zealand, and largely with all the infrastructure we've got, about 65% of it's underground. The slightly jarring, controversial paragraph we'll see there today is that we're about to change our investment in the network, and we're about to change what we need to spend to renew the assets that are largely getting to a 50, 60-year life and need to be upgraded. And 50 and 60 years ago, it's a lot different replacing them than it is today. So we need to have a conversation about that. So roughly around the 520 million we expect to spend over the next 10 years, that's probably going to be closer to $1 billion. Around the OPEX we're spending for the next 10 years, around the 180 we're spending now, it's probably going to be closer to 400 million. But it doesn't have to be if we start to think about some of the options we have by chatting to customers about some of the investments they're making and how those investments can help to defer some of this expenditure further down the track. So we need to have a wee check about what that looks like. This is the typical structure of New Zealand's electricity system. Mike's talked about, you've got the big end generation, you've got the large towers that Transpower operate. We connect onto that as one of 29 electricity distribution businesses, as one electricity. Then the retailers take the electricity through the system and sell it on to customers. So it's very much start at one end, go right down to the other end, and customers end up consuming the electricity, whether it's residential, commercial, or industrial. Well, that's how it used to be. Now it's all changing. The whole system tips on its head, because now we've got generation at the customer's house or the business. Mike's talked about that. We've got batteries and storage, and we've got vehicles that are starting to run on batteries as well. So really, it's gone all now back to front. So part of that, and also thinking about security of what people are doing, is the resilience and reliability of that is also going to depend on some of these new devices coming in. That creates us a lot of opportunity. We're energy agnostic. We don't really mind where the energy comes from. We're just providing infrastructure to get the energy to and fro. And the fro bit's the interesting. How do we perform as a business? We're cheap and reliable. I'm not sure if that's a thing to put on the map. Cheap and reliable. So we have very low costs on our network, largely because we haven't had a lot of really big growth happening in Wellington, in the Wellington region. It's all been very, very steady, and the capacity we've had, we're largely filling it up without really too many big shocks. We're not having to suddenly take stuff away and put new stuff in. So it allows us to run a very modest network. From a reliability point of view, there's this magic thing called Sadie, and no, she's not John Farnham's cleaning lady. Sadie is around, what's the duration of the interruptions we have on the network? So if you're on the network, largely it's reliable because you have about 30 minutes of interruptions once every 2 years. I should see a whole lot of hands go up going, hang on, Greg, last time I had an interruption it took 5 hours and we're without power overnight. But then you've got to go back and say, when's the last time that occurred? There'll be pockets on the network that do better or worse than others, and others where people say, actually, I can't remember the last time, I'll stand on one foot, I had an interruption to my power supply. So it's a very reliable network, largely because 64% it's underground, outside of the weather. The downside is it's a sizably active area, so being underground sometimes isn't the best thing to do. So because we've done, we're almost victims of our own success, because we've done such a good job on the network, that OPEX number, the cost of maintaining the network is now almost too low for the age of the network. So we're going to have to get some more money from somewhere. I'm sure there'll be a buck at the door as we head out. But we need a way of thinking about how we need to do that. And you'll get to a point where you say, we're throwing good money after bad, and we keep trying to maintain an asset that's really beyond its useful life. We have to start to renew it. It's the renewing it, what do we need to renew it with, that's where we need to come and talk to our customers about. Solar. I'll stand over here because Mike's sitting here, he's going to kick me. Solar is absolutely fascinating. It happens in the middle of the day. I too have a napkin, and I've drawn my own sketch. So we do have peaks in the morning and bigger peaks in the evening. Typically our network is what they call winter peaking. It's when all the demand comes on, gets really, really high, and pushes the limits of our assets. Commercial solar happens during the day. It's when the sun's shining, real fast payback, economics link closely to the wholesale market. Commercial solar is really, really good. Mike's demonstrated that in the last hour. Residential solar, unfortunately, it happens when people are at work. There's not a lot of demand on the household during the day, it happens in the evening. So the best thing to happen there is get a battery. Or work from home. Work from home is pretty popular post-COVID. Your 5 kilowatt hour storage, you usually tend to use 20 kilowatt hours in a day, so leaving the grid isn't really a viable option. You can for probably about 4 or 5 months a year, absolutely fine, but when you start getting cooler, your energy starts being used. It's got about a 5 to 6 year payback. Schools going to solar, I think we're missing something here. I think if we look at how we make our network more resilient, we can't make all of our overhead lines shock-proof. Got a slide later on that. But there are pockets in our community you could go to which we could make even more resilient. So rather than spread it across all of the assets, you can actually look at pockets. So we're now talking to schools, Ministry of Education, civil defence, around having pockets in our community where you can manage everyone's welfare so they can buy some time to get the network stood back up. Mainly because the changing climate is telling us we're going to get bigger storms. Now, Auckland can have those, we're really happy about that, but unfortunately they will travel down here at some stage. Energy conservation around schools as well. You've got a whole opportunity there around building solar battery backup systems that outside the day period are available for the community. And the idea of where we might get into further down the track are looking at community batteries, where we can start to store some energy. The idea behind that we touched on last night. Community battery, Sydney Melbourne are doing these now. I think PowerCo are doing them as well, where you can start to store some of the solar coming into the network during the day and release it back during the night. That means we don't have to build such big assets. So solar, we need a battery. We really want to sort of take energy from the trough where the sun is and start to try and lessen that peak where we've got demand on the network, which is forcing us to build bigger assets to replace the assets that are there. You'll see that our pricing is starting to become more around time of use. So our pricing of using our infrastructure is getting higher when it's congested and lower when it's not. Now that's a price signal that's actually quite an advantage for consumers to save a whole lot of money. A whole lot of money by avoiding the high price period so they can do most of their activity during the low price period. So that's the reward for actually being sensitive to when you're using your energy. 2017. We worked with Contact Energy. They were very keen to go and trial some solar battery units on the Wellington network. They said, give us one of your Reading kV feeders that's congested, and we'll put in 6 battery solar systems, and we'll let you run them to actually lower the peak on the network. So this is what this very complex graph looks like. What it's largely doing is we've got peak demand in those 2 light grey areas. The blue is where the battery is charged, and that cutaway darker grey is where the peak on that household is actually being reduced. It's a real sawtooth. We've sort of got a big demand coming on from the battery, almost as big as what the demand of the house would have been. And then we've got these big sawtooth peaks where the battery is sort of coming to an end and it's starting to flatten off, and then the load comes back onto the network. So this is a very useful exercise for us to work out what the battery performance is of supporting the peak into the network, how long does it last, and how much heavy lifting can it do. This is a very small sample, but you can imagine these things scattered all around the network and doing all a little bit at a time in different time periods, and you can start to see how a lot of solar, a lot of batteries are going to start to smooth the network, which is very good. Unfortunately, the cost of this at the time in 2017 wasn't as economic as what you'd see today in today's prices. So what does solar look like on the Wellington network right at the moment? It's a very low penetration at the moment. There's not a lot of solar on the network. I think because out of the 176,000 electricity connections on the network, there's about 67,000 gas connections. You've got gas and you've got solar, sorry, you've got gas and you've got an electricity connection. There's not much less for the solar to do. But wait, there's more, because that's rapidly changing. So that opportunity is going to open right up very, very quickly, largely because of gas in the New Zealand market starting to become much harder to find and much higher at its price. So we're starting to see areas of solar penetration coming through. We're starting to see solar units around the 5 kVA being very, very popular, and the bigger units not so. The thing that is surprising is how many solar systems have been going in without the battery. So there's about 80% going in without batteries, and you're really missing an opportunity if you don't put a battery in with your solar. And we can talk about that a wee bit more as we go through these slides, because it gives you an opportunity to actually have storage of that energy at a time where the price might be very high for you to take advantage of that storage. This is what the last 12 months looks like. The good news is we're getting more people in the last 12 months, almost 56%, putting batteries with their solar. So it's changed, it's moved, and we're starting to see more battery solar systems being put in. That's probably largely due to affordability. So that's fantastic that the solar price is getting down. And we can start to see by a month, we're sort of getting in the 50s and 70s as we sort of go through. And that's great. We're really pleased about that. EVs are something that's been pretty popular in Wellington because it's a very congested CBD. If you buy an EV and plug it in, your power price goes up. That's really disappointing. But what you're doing is taking fossil fuel out of your house, which the total energy, you might talk about this in the last presentation, lowers down. So we've got to be really careful in the frame of reference of where you're looking for things from. I'm going to buy an electric vehicle, all I'm going to do is put my price of power up at a time where the price of power is really expensive. It is, but there's ways of thinking about when's it less expensive and when should I be actually charging my vehicle. And if you see when price signals are coming through at the congestion period, if you charge your vehicle after 9 o'clock at night, you're starting to get half the price of what it would have cost you if you're charging it before 9 o'clock at night, up to 5 o'clock. So these sorts of ideas around where the savings are for your household, you get a 45% reduction in your household energy cost by getting rid of petrol. So those sorts of things are coming through. Now, cost of a petrol car, cost of an EV aren't quite there yet. But if you think about the 463 manufacturing plants in China, you're very soon going to see electric vehicles coming into the market that are much cheaper than what's currently hitting the New Zealand market at the moment. We look forward to that day. An EV is a very simple vehicle. It's like an iPad on wheels, there's not much to it. We've done a lot of work since 2017 right through 2021, and we actually mapped out for New Zealand what the roadmap was for electric vehicle management. We published that in 2021, and quick as a flash, nothing's happened. The reliance on vehicle charging in New Zealand was really getting government to take some leadership about where the vehicles are registered, how the vehicles charge, and setting up a charging system that's discoverable. The great thing about Australia when they had huge incentives for solar to go on roofs is they put in an eye-watering incentive of about 66 cents a kilowatt hour of energy if you could feed it back into the grid. Now, trying to get rid of coal in Australia, solar was the way they started doing that. And that's a fantastic incentive. We saw incentives on EVs, but what they also did, which was very clever, and I know you won't hear me talk a lot about clever in Australian in the sentence for the rest of my presentation, but the thing that is very clever is the bit that makes the solar system work, the inverter, actually had to connect to the internet. So it gave visibility of where the solar inverters were, so when our sister company in South Australia got into a world of trouble with too much solar on their network, they were able to actually manage the solar so the network stayed up. There is no visibility of these electric vehicles on our network. In fact, there's 13,000 of them free-ranging, charging at any time they like on our network, and now we have to do a very large education program of trying to get people to charge them at the right time. Luckily, most of the charging points are 3-pin plugs, and that's pretty small, so we're not getting the push on that. But as these vehicles are now being sold with larger charging systems, 7 kilowatts, 11 kilowatts for Tesla, that 11 kilowatts on what largely is seen as a 4 kilowatt demand on a household is starting to cause a demand increase on the network. And that network's not built for that level of demand, but if we go back to the napkin drawing, that demand gap in the middle of the day is okay, or after 9 o'clock at night is okay. There is capacity on the network if we can sequence when these big storage devices need to take their sip of electricity throughout the day. So that's a lot of planning we did on that, but we unfortunately couldn't get government policy or regulation to pick up some of the things we needed to do to work with a platform operator out of Melbourne, and we could actually see cars registering and see charges coming on, and they could be orchestrated. But we've missed that in New Zealand. Because we've got such a strong market focus, the market will solve these points. We didn't quite get there. So when people talk about a smart charger, be very careful. It's a bit like a smart meter. It's only smart if it registers to something that can see it, and you've got permissions from the people that allow you to use it. Without those two other points, it's not smart. So be very careful when people say, I need a smart charger, and you go, that's because you're registering to a platform that someone can operate, and because you've given permissions of when you're allowing it to be used. Without those two other points, it's not very smart at all. This is the thing you'll hear talked a wee bit about. It's called the value stack. And this is where the benefit of things happening for a customer are the highest value when they happen at the customer's place. So this is really around generation, it's around charging, it's around storage, it's around incentives. So we were very interested in vehicles coming onto our network that put a 50 kilowatt battery in the garage. We were very happy about that because the 4 kilowatts they use, and they've got 50 kilowatts sitting in the garage, we could see a world of fun to be had for everyone and a lot of cost saving. Our goal was to try and get the vehicle and the network to become very closely engaged around when they charged or potentially when they discharged. Because that 50 kilowatt of storage is very large. And that means we can actually orchestrate a lot less investment in our network if these vehicles can support the peak demand for 3 or 4 hours for certain times of the year. It may only be called on 10 times. But the idea of a 50 kilowatt hour battery providing a couple of kilowatts for 3 hours, so it's 6 kilowatt hours out of a 50 kilowatt hour battery, means we can start to move into the peak demand on our network and lower it, so there's less investment. Unfortunately, the cost to go to the dance, the ticket, is about £4,000 to make that happen. And for every vehicle, if you're going to say to them, want to spend another $8,000 or $9,000, it's almost outside the reach of making economic for that to happen. It will occur, it will get there, but it's too early at the moment. So what we're probably looking at doing is starting to create a network battery that can do the same thing. So the network battery can stay in the network, it can look at where we are from about 4,500 transformers, where it should live for a period of time. It's quite small, it's probably, rather than 50 kilowatts, it's probably 200 kilowatts, and that can supplement the network when it's getting challenged at the peak demand period. We can move around, we might have a couple of hundred of them, and that's the easy way for us to bridge the technology gap or the affordability of those vehicles coming in. So what will the battery do? It'll take the midday sunshine, it'll fill it up, and then when the people come home and start using all their electricity, we can start to let that battery go to support the network that's already there. So we're trying to orchestrate the network in that way until we can get the vehicles there. The biggest fear when we're talking to people about use of vehicle batteries was, what say you void my warranty? And there's all those sorts of questions about who can do what. The vehicle I drive is connected to the internet. So every time I jump in it on a 2-monthly basis, I get a nice message saying, we are going to be upgrading your vehicle. And I go, fun. So you've got to have things set, you leave it, come back the next time, you turn it on and go, I wonder what's going to happen. But the idea behind that is, we may talk about smart chargers, but the vehicle manufacturers can access the vehicle. So one day I might get rung up by, I don't know, Nissan, and say, congratulations Greg, you've got the 2 millionth vehicle in New Zealand, would you like us to alter their charging so they don't drag your network down? And I go, I'm still waiting for a call, but you never know what's going to happen around the corner. So we've been talking about an appliance that someone puts in a garage that someone wants to manage, but you've already got an OEM, the manufacturer, who may be actually orchestrating the car for you at some stage. And they may actually talk about what that value is to you for them to orchestrate your car or your alliance company, or the grid operator, depending on what's going on. It's an interesting work. One of our fears is this happening. Everyone gets home and charges their car at 5 o'clock. What could possibly go wrong? You might need to go outside and get a poker from the car in the foyer. So we have to work very, very hard to try and get people to understand the dangers of charging at peak time. Sure, plug it in, but set your timer to charge it after 9 o'clock when there's a bit of space to charge it. So a lot of our work and a lot of the work of the agencies, each do a very good job, is trying to just think about behaviours of people and what that means. Buses. We had Metford come to us and say, we want half a megawatt in Reef Street. And we go, what are you doing? And why there? Oh, it's where the bus turns around. And we go, so why does it turn around there? What's the end of the route? Why is the end of the route? There's no customers. We go, that's cool. There's actually no network. But we want half a megawatt. And you go, oh. So we politely said, for us to upgrade to get half a megawatt to that point of our network, it's about $1 million. We hadn't factored on $1 million. We bought the buses, but we don't have any spare cash. So then we got into this idea of what's the availability of being more dynamic in our thinking about charging things. Because we said to the bus, hang on a minute, you're not going to operate this when the network's congested, are you? They go, no, they're all back in bed at their Bernie getting some charging from our charging system. So I said, well, why don't we set up a dynamic connection agreement that will give you your half a megawatt all the time we can until you can't have it. And then we'll turn you down. And they go, well, what does that mean? They said, we might only give you 200 kilowatts when we don't have half a megawatt left in the network. What's that going to cost us? Well, it's a round figure. It's just orchestrating your buses to make sure they can fill in the gaps on the network. So we started thinking about dynamic charging or putting on operating envelopes that can't go out certain parameters. So every time in the past we've talked to someone about connecting to our network, it's always been about, this is our capacity we want, and once you sign them up, you've got it forever and a day. You don't change it. This is starting to go, you've got a contract that says you can have this capacity for this period and another capacity for another period. And that dynamic way is starting to push demand into the network when the network can accept it and say, look, we have to turn you down when we can't do that. So this is a way of actually starting to look at bigger loads coming on the network that we can orchestrate and hopefully get them done. And these bigger loads are starting to come through areas that are further and further away from our central point of supply. This is part of Mike's conversation about machines. These machines are meant to be here by now, but something's happened with flights and affordability, so we haven't seen them come in yet. But these planes, 19-seater aerospace ES-19s, they charge in 40 minutes so they can then get back in there with their passengers. They're only 19-seat aircraft, they're not large, but they're a megawatt to charge them. 40 minutes, a megawatt back. Yeah, you sit there and go, okay. So a lot of this work around electrification of airplanes is coming to fruition internationally from the Hutt Valley. Robinson Research is doing a lot of work on how to make this work, which is fantastic. But the idea of having these big megawatt chargers sitting at the airport for a 19-seater aircraft, we've got Air New Zealand now who are asking for chargers for their planes. So we're now starting to look at that. Some of the planes are hybrids, and some of the hybrids are using dual fuel battery and have aviation. So they're starting to think about aviation fuel to get them up, batteries for cruise, and then fully powered coming down. Because if you ever land in Wellington, sooner or later, you'll need the power to get back up. So we've been looking at this airport, a bit like Reeve Street with the bus chargers, a long way away from the centre of our network. So we're having to think about investment we need to make for these big ones. Do you believe in ferries? This was coming, did a lot of work in setting up what we needed to do. The good thing about this ferry, it was coming with a battery, and that was fantastic. So about a $10 million investment for us to get the charging that these ferries needed at Kaifara. We started talking to Contact about whether they could put a shore battery in. That came out of Norway with their ferries. Put a big battery on the shore, charge it up for as long as you can, 12, 14, 16 hours, and then you smack that energy into the ferry very, very quickly. It may be what we need to do for the plane is start to build onshore battery facilities to actually charge these things up a little bit quicker. The thing about these boats and their capability though is from the 1998 Auckland energy crisis, these style of boats with generation on board can start to feed back into the network. So from a civil defence emergency management point of view, having ferry terminals here that are electric and we can connect the boats means they can actually generate back into the system. So we're starting to think carefully about ship-to-shore supplies and some of the ships coming in as we can use them as big generators back into the network. So although there might be quite an investment to get them charged up, there's also the hedge of saying once in that blue moon when it's our turn, some of these ships docking around the harbour, the benefit of the harbour network can start to support some of these areas. Eastbourne, Tony, even Island Bay. Oh, rail, yeah. Q Rail's just won the lottery of 800 million from the New Zealand government to upgrade bigger trains running more often and faster on these two systems. Marston to Palmerston North and through the city. So we're blessed with electric rail systems, it's fantastic. But building a bigger one on the existing assets does challenge greater investment. So this will tip us over. It's getting into several tens of millions of dollars for us to do that. But there's 82,000 daily commuters not taking their car. And that's 40 million trips a year not using fuel. So we understand completely the need to upgrade the infrastructure to keep those electric. So that's a blessing, but it's going to make us think very carefully about what we need to do with that impact. The multiple stations the train goes through are the multiple supply points we need to think about. So the network is going to get a lot of heavy lifting needing to do for this electrification. Just going to move away a wee bit and talk about the climate and some of the things that are also happening around Wellington. Hutt Valley's taken a leadership project around making sure that flood protection is keeping homes safe. So that's really important. There's a lot of infrastructure that has to move to make way for stop banks, and there's a large road network upgrade as well. Think about that. While we have to shift a lot of our assets, that's the time, and because they're fairly mature, we can start to look at what size they need to be for the next life of their asset, which for cables is 70 years. Rumour is I won't be here, but we'll see how that goes. I do have a brother who's in the medical. He said I can live till 150, but I'll be in separate jars. Quality of life, 0. So this idea of flood protection and trying to work out what is the best way of making it happen, that we can be sure that when we shift our assets and they get renewed, that we are thinking about the future in a way that we need to think about it. So you don't have to go too far down this river system to get to the sea. And at the sea, there's other risks. There's tsunami risks, there's risk of climate change surge. So we need to think about what other assets do we have in those zones when we shift these assets, that there's a better place we should be relocating something for the next 7 years. So this does disrupt a lot of our thinking about existing assets, their existing use, and what we need to do. And rather jarringly, we have to also think about what's going to happen in climate change, storm surge, and the bankers or the insurers determining what's needed for the utilities in the future. Now, councils will do their level best to stop this happening. We will fall in behind the councils to make sure our infrastructure is as good as what they can build to stop this from happening. But we've got markets lending or insurers covering these risks that we need to think carefully about. So our assets in some of these zones that are going to be exposed to great climate risk, we need to think carefully about not over-investing, and therefore that investment not being there. But largely, any managed retreat in these areas is going to be very well planned. Opportunities are sometimes known. Cyclone Gabrielle that did a lot of damage in the Hawke's Bay, there's a study done in 2018 that estimated what would happen to Transpower's Redcliffe substation due to flooding. So that was a known risk. But unfortunately, those known risks in something of such a large infrastructure, very hard commercially to actually pay for it to be moved in a sunny day. You almost, insurance is a funny thing, you almost have to wait to have an event before you go, oh, we should have shifted it. So these sorts of things are learnings that we have to put into our future asset investment, and building that we have to think, right, what are the things that are changing we haven't seen yet, but suddenly you get to a point of going, there are a few signs around the country and other countries that we need to take heed of. The other problem is our network doesn't go well with shocks, whether they be earthquakes or high wind events. When we serve our customers, usually after the power's been off, and we say, what's your criteria for us as a supplier of infrastructure for electricity being continuous for you? Well, don't let the lights go out. If power goes off, get it on quickly. Don't put up the price. Now, they're all mutually exclusive, as we all know. We run asset management plans, and we have to cover off what is the affordability, security, the safety and reliability that our community wants from our network. And this is why we're starting to talk about that. We're on a price path at the moment. We're regulated by the Commerce Commission on price and quality. And we're regulated like nothing new is going to happen to the network. So it's all BAU, it's all what's been happening in the past will happen in the future, but we know that won't happen. So we have to start to get to a point as the assets get to end of life of a plan of when we upgrade them, what we upgrade to. So it's all about how we manage risks of the future and what that means commercially and what their customers want. There's a survey running around at the moment downstairs about what are your preferences for the network of the future. Part of the reason for sponsoring this is to be able to ask you that question. And of course, we get wind trampoline and the LB lines, common problem. We don't try and collect those, we try and ask our customers to try and keep them tight down. We did a lot of work in 2019, led by Dane Fran Miles, chair of the Wellington Lifelines group. And this was a merit model, a treasury model, that looked at an earthquake event and went through all the different infrastructure groups, roading, water, electricity, fuel, comms, gas, and the ports to see what would we need to do to recover and get a basic supply back, and how many days would that be? It was very interesting because it was like submitting your homework, hoping to get maybe a B or a C if you did really badly. Because all of us are looking at each other, working out who's the worst utility coming back after a major event. We chose an earthquake event, 7.5 at Horndon, and it was roading. Roading. So the roading system failed, and they were the longest one to get back. But the fascination of it being roading is we said, what does that mean when we break up our roading network? And what it meant is that Wellington turns into, in the general sense, in the wider sense of the region, including Hutt and Porirua, turns into about 6 islands. So those islands are islands, there's no road to or from them. So what that did for us is post the 2016 Kaikoura earthquake event, we were given license from government to actually go back to the policymakers at MB and the regulation people at the Commerce Commission and ask for an earthquake readiness package, about $32 million. So what we did is we populated those islands with spare equipment that we could use within the island to rebuild the network to a basic level that could actually sustain some power supply to those communities. Being underground is tricky. We've got some assets there that are due for replacement. They're worth about $160 million, but they are quite fragile. So we've brought in equipment that goes above ground to secure those underground routes that we can't make. They don't look pretty, but when the power's off, it doesn't really matter. Ironically, in the 2010-11 Christchurch earthquake series, people were still protesting about putting poles back up in Christchurch to get to New Brighton. They said, we don't want poles because they'll never come down. Your power was off, but they still said we don't want poles up in Christchurch. Very interesting. One of the things that we've just moved to is, and councils will understand this software because I think they're using it too, is a program called Resilience Explorer from a company in Christchurch University, fed graduates from Urban Intelligence. And what this does is it takes our geographic system of where our assets are located, and it takes all the climate science predictions of what's going to happen with landslides or floods or rainfall that scale up due to climate change. And then we can map it back onto our assets to see which assets are threatened. So if you go to the Greater Wellington site, it's very broad about where things are going to happen. This site will actually start to detail very quickly where assets are going to be challenged by a change in ground subsidence, a change in water level, flood or landslide. So we're starting to run these programs through our assets. What it does is it collapses down where we're at risk. Collapses down how much money we should be spending, or if we replace the asset, what future conditions that we haven't seen in the past that asset is going to have to see and manage in the future. So those sorts of things we're looking at just to try and make sure we are guided with the most recent knowledge about what we do when we upgrade our assets. This is the market price, the wholesale market price of electricity, which Wednesday's announcement from the Frontier Economics Report, the government was going to sell. Oh yeah? Didn't quite get there, right? The Frontier Report's a fascinating report. Largely the market price, the wholesale market price of electricity has doubled, largely because gas that is supporting generation has got scarce and got really expensive. So it's been priced into the market. That's a problem because there isn't a lot more gas, and one of the things that came out Wednesday's report is to look at the feasibility of building a small LNG terminal to bring some gas in. The downside of not managing gas and gas supply is we've gone back to coal. So, yeah. Coal's great, we'll just sit there and do nothing, but it's hugely polluting. So we kind of haven't got this right. So I'm trying to talk about a whole lot of things around what I'm doing with electricity, reinforcing the network, making the network capable of actually doing some of these things around bringing solar, batteries and vehicles on. But homeowners and affordability are setting a high price for the energy. So happy days if you're going to go solar, because it makes that more affordable. So the thing about generating your own energy at home is suddenly becoming in reach when these prices stay up at this level. This is the Commerce Commission's allowances back into our business of how much capital we can spend a year. So you can see from 2018-19, it's been pretty flat, around $50 million a year of capex. Then you can start to see it lift. We were asked in 2024 to put a plan together to say, what does 2050 look like? So, fully electrified. Everyone has an electric vehicle. There is no gas on the network, commercial, industrial, or residential. And there's population growth. And Mike said the magic number, everything doubles. And that's fine. To get this at the time when we're replacing our assets, we've got to overbuild the network with capacity that lasts out 50 years of the asset, which is really from now, you're starting to look at 2075. Again, I'm not here to see it. So that's all the projection. We gave the forecast. The Commission quite rightly came back and said you can't have that. It's a shock to customers. So they've gone down to that green line that steps up. So we've sort of gone from, make it easy to see, about $100 million. So that's our step up we've had as we move into the next 5-year period. We're looking whether that number is sensible, whether it's going to be enough to actually do the things we need to do on our network around electrification. And we have to consult our community to say, what does that look like? Key thing to keeping the network at the lowest cost possible is to manage demand response. So it's when people use energy at the time the network's most congested, and if they use it during that time, the network will either go off or we have to invest to make the capacity larger. If that happens only 20 times a year, then we have a problem because the rest of the year people still need to support that infrastructure even though it's only local. So the idea is for us to work really hard on that demand response and make sure we incentivize customers for their storage elements, hot water cylinders, EV chargers, is to actually shift those out of that period so we take the load off the network. If you've got solar and you've got a battery, that battery through your retailer should be incentivized to discharge at that period to lower that fee. And that should save a lot of cost for a homeowner on their energy. So these are very simple behavioural things we need to educate people on so we can say, are you prepared to do that? And yes, we are. Then we can say, we won't therefore invest as much in the network if you decide, I want my hot water cylinder and I want my electric vehicle charging, I want it all done when I get home. You're at freedom to do that, but we need to think about what that means. We can't see our low voltage network. We can see our high voltage network, 55,000 points in real time, come back to our control room through our SCADA system. We can monitor what's happening on that. We can feeders, cables, substations, all of that. Once it goes to the distribution transformer in the streets and the low voltage feeding around the streets, we can't see it. We've got no idea what's going on. We just know it's been built big enough for people that were behaving like they were for the last decade. But all this new technology coming in and sitting in the customer's home changes it out of sight. Smart meters, or meters that are slightly more advanced than the dumb meters, are giving us some records on a half-hour basis of how much energy is being used. This model has been built up through a Monte Carlo simulation of gas exit, EV pickup, population growth. What it does is provides a heat map of maybe 6 areas that are going to overload first. These are the areas we have to look at. If we use smart meter data, and this is where I got told off by the Commission yesterday, if we use smart meter data, we need to look at the meters for 175,000 connections and we probably need 10 data points. So that's 1.7 million connections we have to manage in data. At the moment, I've got 14 people 24/7 running 55,000 points, and I want to go to 1.7 million. The thing about the data from the smart meter is I only need to know these areas. I only need to know 200 of my 4,500 transformers. So we've sort of said to the Commission, we don't think we're going to be purchasing smart meter data anytime soon and building a big IT system. Because that's all held by the smart meter people. All they need to do is ask them a question and ask for some information. It's like going to a library. Do I need to read every book? No, I'm only interested in these 5. So we've sort of crunched down our view of how we're going to manage the future into immediately about 200 sites. From those 200 sites, we can then start to map it out. We're about to put our requirement back to the Commission to set a trigger point of when the next site comes up that we can deal with it in a couple of years, and then look at the trigger points of the remaining 4,300 as to when we need to do that. And when we need to do that will depend on what demand is being taken from those points, tipping over the edge, or bring them back from the edge. So we'll be talking to retailers very carefully about putting price incentives to shift their customers' demand away from the congestion period. Why am I using retailers? I could have 176,000 relationships, or I could have 27. And those 27 relationships, those retailers, they are the ones that customers align to for the energy pricing. And the competitive nature of which retailer you've got, by which terms they're providing you, should be what you drive. You should be driving better pricing from your retailers, offering better offerings of their services. So what we end up doing is start to look at smarter pricing and greater fairness. At the moment, it's the same price across the whole network. Whatever you're doing or however you're doing it, it's the same price. It is possible to reflect local constraints of congestion and response and changing the price signals through the retailers to encourage a demand response. So therefore, the people who are causing the investment in the network also get to pay for it, rather than spread it across everybody. Now, when we upgrade assets, the assets have a common base of being upgraded, that is shared. But when we start getting to specific areas that are not deciding to shift their load away from the demand period, then we need to think about how we capture that as well. Different prices between areas, less cross-subsidisation. The goal is fairer longer-term costs. Retailers partner with customers. Again, we have periods of the network which are high dollar, congested in red. We have sunshine coming in, and we have night time for shifting some load when we've upgraded capacity. In Melbourne, they're currently saying to people it's free between 10 o'clock in the morning and 2 o'clock in the afternoon to turn all your devices on. They've got capacity there to do that. To incentivise it, there's no line charges between those hours. Yeah. It's because of the solar. The solar's there, pumping into the network, and it's overloading the network, kind of. If you've got devices, you can put the solar in, and then use those devices later in the day. It's a bit of a win-win for everybody. So we need clear, simple signals for retailers to support behaviour change of making sure when the network's congested that we have people saying, I understand that's going to be a higher price, what can I do differently? Sure, there's things you're going to have to run through those periods anyway, but the bigger things we're trying to get pushed away. These small shifts at scale will lower the local peaks. And this defers us the need to build the bigger network straight away. We can push that out as long as we can and save everyone some money. So network is going to get upgraded when demand cannot be shifted purely just to keep the lights on. So what we're asking customers is through the survey we've got running is to actually collect some of this information about having a say about views on reliability, how important is that, lights staying on, thankful they haven't gone off, how embarrassing, pricing, and also smarter technologies that we can dip into and look at for actually being more cost effective. Fairness of new approaches, and also preferences for peak reduction, tools and investments. That, I think, is more. Any questions? Hard ones? Shift the mic. Easy ones? Point to me. Hello.
Just if it looks like it'd be sensible to just buy a battery to get solar and then take the power at the cheap times to charge your battery and then feed that back to yourself and use that in the...
Do you want to jump and come work?
Has someone done that maths? Because it sounds like it would work out.
Yeah, and that's the idea of maybe having to go to a network battery position at part of the transition we're needing to do. Because once you've got a vehicle in your garage, which is 10 or 12 times larger than the demand you use in your house, you've got a pretty good hedge there. So that's great. A battery with your solar gives you every day some energy which has a higher value in the evening than it did when you stored it for the day.
And I can buy it off you cheaper, probably than bothering with putting solar on or something. Like in the middle of the night, buy it off you in the night, put it into my battery and use it at the peak.
So I don't sell energy. I just sell infrastructure.
Sorry,
So yeah,
the
that's
other
okay.
people,
Yeah, that's okay. But if you want to talk to a retailer about doing that, that's absolutely fine. But I think Mike's just shown that the cost of retail wholesale energy is now breaking even with what you can do with solar and batteries. So you're starting to get to that period. There is an upfront cost, so that's the bit you need to think about. And Solar Zero attempted but didn't quite land it of actually trying to take the capital and make it an OPEX cost over a period of time. So there will be these schemes that gradually come in where, look at Ika, gradually come in that there may be a change in appliance, particularly around gas appliances, which is a big cost. And if gas exits and you've got to shift very quickly to a different fuel like electricity, your appliance change out, if we can spread that capital over a period of 10 years, or put it on the house as part of your mortgage or your rates, then that's going to give people a lot smoother ride through when these things start to change quite rapidly.
Mike, do you want to talk as well to the, like, just very quickly
Oh,
on
it's just,
the
I mean,
economics of that?
financing batteries on your mortgage is 28 cents a kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
I don't think you'll find many examples of peak and off-peak prices having a 28-cent spread, so that's why batteries economically by themselves don't work.
Yeah.
As soon as you get 13 cents in solar, you're starting to see that batteries may start to pay off because you will get that 28-cent spread with peak.
Yeah.
That'll come down over time, that might change, but for now, I don't think batteries by themselves, this is the tariff system isn't in place to allow that to happen.
Yeah.
But that's what we're trying to get working, right?
It is starting to shift though, with time of use pricing being mandated to be reflected from July next year by all retailers, then they will be reflecting higher price periods and lower price periods. So I said last night, I envisage at some stage in the next 2 to 3 years, we'll be saying to EV owners, it's free on Saturdays and Sundays to charge your vehicles. We'll just take the line charge away. What that does is the bigger vehicles that need longer to charge will charge up in that period. We're a consortium, quickly touched this last night, we formed a consortium to help Kaingaora share the sunshine. Kaingaora had solar on some of their homes, but not on all of their homes. So the idea was to capture through a retailer the solar that was excess of the network, and then share it back as a value to the customers who didn't have solar. We were involved in that because it broke a whole lot of market rules. Not that we're quite excited about breaking market rules, but the idea was that for us, we were looking at it from the point of view of getting solar reconciled at the connection point to the network and then captured. And then if you had driven your EV into work away from your home, then as long as that was plugged in, we could find that solar and put it into the EV. So why would we do that? We do that because that means charging during the day, that load in the middle of the day to capture the solar, will then be transported back to home, plugged into charge with a much lesser charge demand on the network. So we're trying to balance that out. Not ready yet, but we can't quite do it. Yes?
Is there power wire technology that's improving? I've heard stories that there's new wire construction that you can actually get a lot more energy through it so that you don't have to put so many poles up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we've just said the same thing. Yeah.
But it's not available yet, or?
Look, I don't know, but one of our engineers just came and talked about it. So if it's been talked about, then manufacturing is pretty quick to make it available in the market. Yep.
At the moment, most households around here can only export 5 kilowatts into the grid.
Yep.
And that's restricting the amount of solar we put on our roofs, and the idea of being able to push our car battery back into the grid kind of falls over as well, because you can have a 50 kilowatt hour battery and you can only export 5 at a time. So have you guys got any plans to increase that limit?
Yeah, the limit is fairly deliberate around making sure, because the inverter is invisible to the network or any party that wants to provide flexibility services, probably not us to be fair. We have to take a position around, if everyone went to solar, then what would that mean from everyone being able to have access to the network? So we had to put a figure into the inverters. As you've seen on the previous graphs, at 2.5% solar penetration, that seems like a bit of nonsense. So it's only there as a stop-back measure because we don't have that. I talked to Mike about widening that and the ability to widen that. So we've had the voltages widened by Electricity Authority, so we will be looking at what we do with that.
We can take one final question. I can see you jumping out of your seat,
Well,
but then we do have to wrap up because
It was
Ben's
similar to
waiting.
that. It was Aurora announced that their policy would be a 10 kilowatt per phase limit export on the condition that your inverter had the ability to downgrade if the voltage got to a certain level. So I'd love for Wellington Electricity to do something similar.
Sure.
That would be brilliant.
Yeah, sure.
Because they can go down to zero.
Yeah. So we've got sister companies in Melbourne, South Australia, doing exactly the same thing. So it's just the visibility of that inverter and the ability to have that agreement.
Yes, that would be brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry guys, we do have to wrap up because we have been, but before everyone packs up, this is a little something from Mike, all the way from Mike's Electric Cherry Orchard, Electric Cherry Juice. It is full of melatonin, so don't drink it and drive, just like the
really?
bottle that it's in. But thank you so
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.